These are photos and videos of an immense march for Palestine in Sydney, Australia on August 3rd. We'll talk about the protest with an Australian academic and march participant. He's Dr. Michael Karadjis, who teaches social sciences and international development at Western Sydney University. He has been active in progressive campaigns in the socialist movement since marching against the Vietnam War as a high school student. He's presently in Sydney on the east coast of Australia, which, by the way, is in the middle of winter. Good morning.
Good morning, Stanley.
So how big was that march on Sunday?
Look, there's different estimates. So the police the police put it at 90,000, and that's what the media has been reporting. The activists that organised the campaign, the Palestine Action Group, puts it at 300,000, and I think they're much closer to the mark. People have done calculations in terms of the length of the march and the width of the bridge, and so on and so on, that tell us it's probably somewhere in between, somewhere between 200 and 300. I think is a reasonable figure, which is extraordinary.
You say extraordinary. Is that the biggest march for Palestine in Sydney?
For Palestine, it's the biggest by such a long shot that it's hard to imagine. It's actually one of the biggest marches ever in Sydney for anything, and the fact that that's Palestine is just is almost unbelievable.
We could see that it was raining. It was winter, so how cold was it?
It was pretty cold, but it wasn't. It was wet and cold. So it was horrible in terms of weather. You can see obviously a sea of umbrellas.
But the fact that didn't keep people away is impressive in its own.
Well, that's what's so amazing about this. That one might think, well, because of the weather, it won't be so big. But you can imagine if the weather was better. We may have had, huge. See, this was just too huge. The organisers said, you may be aware there was a big issue in the week before with getting permission to march on the bridge. The police tried to stop it. The New South Wales Premier tried to stop it. He intervened to try to stop it, and the organisers put up the figure of 50,000.
That's what they expected.
That's what we expected, and because it was 50,000 that turned up, the police actually stopped the march eventually, and the organisers had to reluctantly agree on the basis that the police hadn't figured for that many people. And so when you're marching across a bridge, there were so many people on the other side, and people still hadn't left the closest station, which is not just the beginning of the march. It was like half a kilometre before the beginning of the march. People hadn't left the station. People were still coming out of the station into this crowded street. And people were on the other side, and there was a big crowd there, and they started to march them back along the side of the same bridge that everybody was marching forward, and it was just too much. I think the police or whatever considered it.
I saw some of your pictures, or the pictures that you posted on Facebook. So did you make it to the actual bridge?
Oh, we got on the bridge, but we only made it halfway before we had to turn back. Yeah. It was. I think I've never been in anything like it, because the other gigantic march was the 2003 march against the war against Iraq. But I was overseas at the time. So for me, this is just. I can't remember being in a crowd like this as well, where you say the day before, I'll see you there at the march. we've been saying that for the last 2 years to friends and so on. This time it was just a joke.
What do you think that has created the big crowd? Is that the obvious starvation?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, the the obvious starvation and it's the whole mix of things with the Israeli government starving people, but also very much more openly declaring that their goals are simply ethnic cleansing, and the fact that they revoked the ceasefire, all the rest of it that's had an impact even on governments around the world. But in particular, Sydney, there's a couple of things. We've been marching pretty much the same route for nearly 2 years, first weekly, then monthly or fortnightly. Now, the decision to go to something as iconic as the Harbour Bridge just really, I think, just electrified people everywhere. People knew about this, that there were a lot of people reportedly, said, well, why don't we do this more often? And, they were told, well, there's been fortnightly marches or weekly marches, and they didn't know. So it was, but also we were helped by the New South Wales Premier and the police because it became a big issue in the news.
I see.
These people are trying to march over our bridge and they're going to cause chaos. And so on. They're going to bring our city to a halt just for their protests about Palestine and so on and so on. So we had this. It was news for a week, and so everyone knew about it. People that I wouldn't imagine being there, said they're going to. Oh, you're going to the march, and of course I'm going. Are you? So it just became a huge thing. We're happy for them to help us with their stupidity in a sense.
Were there slogans or banners or signs that particularly impressed you with their?
I don't know. I mean, there was an enormous range of slogans and banners. I can't think of any that stood out for me. I suppose. I mean,
if you come across any of the posters that were put online, you could send it to me, and we could use it to illustrate this talk.
I mean, you might see them in some of the photos. I mean, one of the problems is this was all umbrellas. You see, so
yeah.
So you weren't really looking at the banners and posters so much.
Yeah. So I understand Hannah Thomas, who I had read about, had been beaten by a police officer at some Palestine protest. She might suffer permanent vision loss. She was there at the protest. When was she attacked? It wasn't that long ago, right?
It's only about a month ago or something like that. It was a small protest outside a factory somewhere in one of the suburbs of Sydney that's producing stuff that goes to Israel. I can't even remember the exact details. Anyway, it was just a protest, and the police gave move-on orders, and this was just outrageous that she was beaten like this. I mean, you've seen the photos. I mean, there's no way that her eye could look like that without being directly punched in the eye. It can't be that she fell over or whatever like they're trying to say. This was absolutely outrageous
Was
stuff.
anyone disciplined in the police for this?
No, not so far. And I mean, they tried to charge her.
Of course.
Look, it's a sad and horrible thing to it. I mean, this is a relatively young person who's a very, very good activist, and she's a former candidate of the Greens. And to be smashed in the eye like that and potentially lose vision in that eye Anyway.
What kind of government does Australia have? I mean, I don't know. The names of the parties mean a heck of a lot to us here, but is it like the Democrats or is it like the Republicans or?
Well, it's the Labor Party. So, but both at the federal level and the state level. I'm talking about the state premier. It's both the Australian Labor Party, which is it's more or less a copy of the British Labor Party, and so in American terms, I suppose, broadly speaking, it's something a bit more like the Democrats than like the Republicans, but with a more specifically Labor origin as opposed to the Democrats.
Yeah.
So, traditionally, workers have voted for the Labor Party, and the progressive side of politics has voted for the Labor Party, even if they don't like them much, just rather than getting in the outright pro big business party, which is in Australia is called the Liberal Party. But in its evolution over the last 30, 40 years, I consider it to be indistinguishable from the Democrats.
So it's been a couple of days since the march, and so what have the politicians been saying about the march and about Palestine?
Well, it's interesting. The politicians that opposed it are sort of almost. I think they're kind of overwhelmed by its size, and they're giving us this line. Yes, we really understand the mass feeling about what's going on in Gaza, and we didn't think it was safe for so many people to march on the bridge, but we understand the feeling, and they can't. This was really. This was Sydney speaking. This was just so overwhelming, and even the Prime Minister sort of. Well, the last few weeks, the Prime Minister's been talking a little bit tougher about Israeli actions, particularly because of the mass starvation, but not offering to do anything about it, or not using the word condemn. Mm-hmm. But this is unacceptable, and after the march, he said, well, I'm gonna place a phone call with Mr. Netanyahu and tell him that we're not happy. And I mean, absolutely. I mean, for him, that's like a radical statement, unfortunately. And of course, it's just laughable for us to hear that. But at the same time, they are obviously feeling the pressure, I think. Mm-hmm. The Murdoch media and the right wing is still, they've gone mad about the march. Okay, but even the leader of the opposition, the Liberal Party, who, if Labor slightly criticises Israel, they'll say, "Oh, you're capitulating to Hamas." I mean, even she came out and said, "Yes, I do admit there's starvation," which for them is significant.
Yeah. And Australia sells weapons to Israel or gives them, or
we have a weapons trade with Israel. That's right, and also other forms of military collaboration with Israel. Yeah. Excuse me.
So have the protest groups, obviously they're energized by this, are they talking yet about the next step, or how are they
talking about another bridge march?
Another bridge march.
And I'm not sure what that means in terms of permissions and so on. They're talking about one quite soon to build on the momentum. Whether that's going to go down well with the police and politicians, I don't know.
Not knowing the geography, that's the most famous bridge in Sydney. Is that
it's an enormous bridge. It's not just the most famous in Sydney. It overwhelms any other bridge in Australia, and I think it's a world famous bridge. It's iconic Sydney. and it's only rarely that we have that it closes for marches. So in 2000, there was another enormous march for reconciliation with Indigenous Australians, but and that was similar size, 250,000 or something like that. But you got to remember the difference there is that was an official march. This is the time where reconciliation is the buzzword of politicians. Justice is more is what Indigenous Australians are calling for. So reconciliation was very mainstream, and you had politicians of both major parties marching in it. So in terms of the numbers, it was easy to get to that size. The media was building it. It was a very important and significant march. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying because it was mainstream, it was easy to get those numbers. Whereas Palestine, now, I was in the Palestine Human Rights Campaign back in the 1980s when we had about, like a dozen active members.
Yeah. And
we used to get marches of 100 or so. Palestine was, then a radical issue. It was nowhere near the mainstream, and the majority of Australians probably considered Palestinians as a synonym for terrorists in the 1980s. And when we got 100 or so people, we thought, well, that was a successful march today.
Yeah.
We'd like it to be bigger, but we know Palestinian marches at least are very spirited. They chant the whole way, they're angry and so on. So we consoled ourselves in that way. But to think that you're talking about 100 people as a successful march, and then by 2000 you're getting like maybe you'd get 1,000 people and so on, and then that was very successful, a couple of thousand maybe, and now you're talking about 200,000 or 300,000.
Back here in the States, there were some big marches, in 23 and in the winter, as the winter approached in DC, and then in the spring, and the students were doing all kinds of things. But the repression of the students was very effective, and there hasn't been a heck of a lot of. There's marches, but nothing huge, and of course we have all these other things with Trump in there and this war against immigrants. It's staggering. They approved $170 billion increase in the ICE budget. So it's an unbelievable amount of money, and they're going to spend it and hire. I just did an interview with an immigrants' rights person, and he said, they'll get every psychopath in the country and pay him like $100,000 to starting salary, just with a $50,000 bonus. So it's going to be very rough here.
Yeah, it's a very, very heavy situation in the US. We're aware of that, and we're glad we don't have it at this stage. But we're not as far off as some people would imagine.
Well, this has been encouraging for us to see this march, and hopefully it'll spur some people over here. Thanks for talking with me.
My pleasure, Stanley. And hope you have a good day, and I hope you do get some bigger marches. Okay.